So now we shall study the anatomy of lacrimal apparatus, but before that, let's get acquainted with the apparent part of eye and the anatomy of palpebrae, that is the eyelids, as without that you cannot completely understand the topic of lacrimal apparatus, as some terminology is involved there. So you can cram it, but you cannot completely understand it. So let's begin. Okay, so the apparent part of eye, the white opaque part is known as sclera, and the central part, transparent part of the eye, which is opposite the black part, the iris, is known as cornea, and the junction of these two is known as limbus or the sclerocorneal junction. Now, the fissure of eye is known as palpebral fissure, right? So the palpebral fissure has two angles, and these angles are known as canthi. This is the lateral canthus and this is the medial canthus. Now the medial canthus, you can observe, if you look closely in the mirror, you can observe that there is a pinkish elevation. It is known as lacus lacrimalis, and on this lacus lacrimalis also there is an elevation further, which is formed by the sweat and skin glands, and that elevation is known as lacrimal caruncle. And there is a fold of bulbar conjunctiva. Now I'll tell you what is bulbar conjunctiva and all in the coming parts, but for now just remember that the fold of bulbar conjunctiva, just lateral to the lacus lacrimalis at the medial canthus, is known as plica semilunaris. On the eyelid also you can observe that there is a papilla, the lacrimal papilla, on which there is a small hole, a small opening, which is known as lacrimal punctum. And this lacrimal punctum is the opening of lacrimal canaliculus. And now we shall learn these things in the lacrimal apparatus. But you need to observe these things in your eye, in the mirror. If you are looking in the mirror, you need to closely observe these things. Only then you can relate with whatever I say. Eyelids have an upper attached margin. This is the upper attached margin, and the lower free margin. And this lower free margin further has two lips, an outer lip and an inner lip. As I said, you need to observe this in the mirror. But we have an outer part and an inner part. Here's the inner part. So the inner part has openings for tarsal glands. These are the openings for tarsal glands. And the outer part, outer lip, has the cilia or the eyelashes. And outer lip is also divided into two parts. The major lateral part, which comprises of cilia. And you may observe that a medial part, a certain part of the a very small medial part is devoid of eyelashes, so that is known as lacrimal part, and the part which consists of eyelashes is known as ciliary part. So every eyelid has an upper attached margin and a lower free margin, and the lower free margin has two lips, outer lip and inner lip, and the inner lip has the openings of tarsal glands, and outer lip has a ciliary part and a lacrimal part. Ciliary part has eyelashes and lacrimal part is devoid of eyelashes. So now we shall study the internal anatomy of an eyelid. So this one is the sagittal section of an eyelid, means the eyelid has been cut from here and the parts have been observed. And this one is the frontal view, and this is the diagram of orbital septum, the palpebral fascia of the eyelid. So beginning with the various layers of eyelid. So the most apparent part of an eyelid, which we normally refer to when we talk of eyelid, is the skin, right? So the skin of eyelid is very thin, loose and easily distensible, and if there is an accumulation of edema or fluid, then it is easily distended. For example, in renal edema, the first site where the edema is apparent is the skin of palpebrae due to its distensibility. Then we have the superficial fascia. The superficial fascia is devoid of fat and consists of the palpebral part of orbicularis oculi muscle. These are the as there is a cut section, these are the some parts of the palpebral part of orbicularis oculi. And behind that, so orbicularis oculi has three parts, right? Orbital part, palpebral part and lacrimal part. So this one is the palpebral part. And behind the muscle, we have loose areolar tissue, which is the continuation of the loose areolar tissue of scalp, which is the fourth layer of scalp. Then we have the orbital septum or the palpebral fascia. Here's the palpebral fascia. And the two palpebral fascia of the eyelids together form the orbital septum. And this orbital septum has four thickenings. The upper and lower thickenings are known as tarsi. This is the superior tarsus and this is the inferior tarsus. And the thickenings on the sides are known as palpebral ligament. The medial one is known as medial palpebral ligament and the lateral one is known as lateral palpebral raphe. And behind the medial palpebral ligament, we have the lacrimal sac. So the structures piercing through the orbital septum are the levator palpebrae superioris muscle, the palpebral part of lacrimal gland, and the nerves and vessels which traverse from the orbit to the face. So these are the three structures which pierce through the orbital septum. Then we have the conjunctiva, the palpebral conjunctiva. Now conjunctiva has two parts, the bulbar, and the bulbar is adherent to the eye, to the eyeball, and the palpebral is adherent to the posterior part of tarsus, the posterior surface of tarsus. And between the two conjunctiva, the bulbar and palpebral conjunctiva, the space is known as conjunctival sac, and the point where these two fuse, the palpebral conjunctiva and the bulbar conjunctiva fuse, is known as the fornix. So this is the superior fornix. And lastly, talking about the glands present in the eyelids. So we have the glands of Zeiss, glands of Moll, and the tarsal glands, also known as the meibomian glands. So the glands of Zeiss are modified sebaceous glands, and glands of Moll are modified sweat glands. Now I have an interesting trick to remember this. If you go to Moll, the malls have centralized AC, right? So you don't perspire. So the glands of Moll are the sweat glands. Means it may sound silly, but that's how I remember this. So glands of Moll are modified sweat glands, and glands of Zeiss are modified sebaceous glands. Then talking about the tarsal glands. So tarsal glands are embedded in the tarsus, and these are also known as meibomian glands. And as we saw, their openings are in the inner lip of eyelid, behind the eyelashes. So this is the eyelash, and here is the opening of tarsal gland. So it is behind the eyelashes, and the glands of Zeiss and glands of Moll are associated with the eyelashes. They are at the near the origin of the eyelashes, as you can appreciate in the diagram. Moreover, the superior tarsus receives two slips of the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. Now, levator palpebrae superioris is is an extraocular muscle and is supplied by the sympathetic system. And it has two parts, voluntary part and involuntary part. And both of these give two slips to the superior tarsus, a voluntary slip and an involuntary slip. The involuntary slip is known as Mueller's muscle. As you can see, the tarsus is receiving the slips from levator palpebrae superioris. So this was about the anatomy of an eyelid. Now talking about some applied aspects. So if in Horner's syndrome, if the sympathetic ganglia are damaged, then we have the set of clinical manifestations which is known as Horner's syndrome, right? And therein we have ptosis as well. Ptosis means the partial closure of eyelids like this. So that is known as ptosis, and that is due to this muscle, this Mueller's muscle, as it is supplied by sympathetic system, right? So if sympathetic system is impaired, then due to this muscle, there is partial closure of eyelids, that is ptosis. Also, the infection of tarsal glands is known as chalazion. So, summing up the anatomy of palpebrae. So, firstly, you have the skin, which is thin and easily distensible. Then we have the superficial fascia, which consists of the orbicularis oculi muscle, and behind it we have the loose alveolar tissue, which is continuous with that of scalp. Then we have the orbital septum, which has superior and inferior thickenings known as tarsi, and the thickenings on sides known as palpebral ligaments. The medial is the medial palpebral ligament, and the lateral one is known as lateral palpebral raphe. And the superior tarsus receives two slips from the levator palpebrae superioris, voluntary and involuntary. Involuntary is known as Mueller's muscle. And then we have the glands. Glands are associated with the palpebrae. The glands near the eyelashes are glands of Zeiss and Moll, which are sebaceous and sweat glands respectively. And embedded in the tarsi, we have the sweat glands, sebaceous glands known as meibomian glands or tarsal glands. And adherent to the posterior surface of tarsus, we have the palpebral conjunctiva. Now, the nerve supply of palpebrae is by four nerves and going from lateral to medially. So, the L for lateral, we have L for lacrimal, then supraorbital, supratrochlear and infratrochlear. Now, two trochlear nerves are medially, they come together medially. Supratrochlear, and the medial most is the infratrochlear. So, the remaining one is supraorbital, right? So, you can remember things like this. Then the lymphatic drainage is literally the lateral part of palpebral is drained by the preauricular or the parotid lymph nodes, and the medial part is drained by the submandibular lymph nodes. Then, talking about the arterial supply, so it is derived from the superior and inferior palpebral arteries, which are the branches of internal carotid, and the lateral palpebral artery, which is the branch of ophthalmic artery, which is again a branch of internal carotid. And the venous drainage is into ophthalmic and facial veins. So now let's begin with the main topic, that is the lacrimal apparatus. So lacrimal apparatus is the uh, set of structures which are involved in the secretion and drainage of the lacrimal fluid, that is the tear fluid. So firstly, let's get acquainted with what is the lacrimal fluid and what is its function. So lacrimal fluid is secreted by the lacrimal gland, and it has important functions like moistening the surface of cornea and conjunctiva, that is the outer surface of eyeball, and the deep surface of eyelids. Then it consists of lysozyme, which has bactericidal action. So if there is some foreign body or something, then the infectious bacteria are combated by these lysozyme, with the help of these lysozyme. And very obvious function, which is known by layman also, is it is helpful in expression of emotion. Anyone can write that. These two are important functions. And talking about its secretion, so its daily secretion is 1 ml per day, and majority of lacrimal fluid evaporates, but the remaining portion is drained by the lacrimal canaliculi and will come across the entire pathway in the coming parts of video. So this was about daily secretion. You don't cry daily, right? But sometimes you cry if there is overflow of emotions or something. So if there is excess of lacrimal fluid, then it overflows as tears. So now we shall term the various components of the lacrimal apparatus. So we have lacrimal gland, ducts of lacrimal gland, conjunctival sac, lacrimal puncta, lacrimal canalicule, lacrimal sac, and nasolacrimal duct. Now in the standard textbook, the lacrimal duct and the ducts of lacrimal gland are considered together, and puncta and canaliculi are considered together. And like that we have 5 parts given there. But anywhere the structure, the names of structures are same. So anyway, in any way you can consider it as you wish. Also the lacrimal gland, which has 2 parts, an orbital part and a palpebral part. Then we have the ducts of lacrimal gland, which open into the conjunctival sac. So lacrimal gland is a J-shaped gland, as you can see. It's a J-shaped gland, and it's a serous gland. It has 2 parts, and it's divided into 2 parts by the muscle levator palpebrae superioris. So the 2 parts are orbital part and palpebral part. The orbital part is larger and deep, and the palpebral part is smaller and superficial. Means the exactly opposite, and it has 2 S. So can be easy to remember. Then talking about their respective locations. So the orbital part is located, as the name suggests, in the orbit, the anterior-inferior part of the roof of orbit, on the lacrimal fossa, and the palpebral part is located just below the levator palpebrae superioris muscle and near the superior fornix of conjunctiva. Now, superior fornix of conjunctiva is the site where the ducts of the palpebral parts or the ducts of palpebral part of the lacrimal gland open. And talking about the ducts of lacrimal gland, so we have ducts emerging from the orbital part and ducts emerging from the palpebral part. Totally the ducts are about 12 in number, and majority of them are from the palpebral part, that is about 6 to 8, and the orbital part gives rise to about 3 to 4 ducts. So you can see in this diagram, majority of ducts are emerging from the palpebral part. Also, the ducts emerging from the orbital part are ought to pass from the palpebral part. So if you remove the palpebral part, then essentially the entire, it's equivalent to the removal of entire lacrimal gland functionally, as all the ducts pass from the palpebral part only and need to pass from there to emerge at the conjunctiva. So the ducts of lacrimal gland ultimately emerge at the superior fornix of the conjunctiva. And if, as I said, if the palpebral part is removed, then the moistening of the conjunctiva is taken over by the Krause's glands. Which are also known as accessory lacrimal glands. So these are the glands present at the superior fornix, and they take over the function of moistening the conjunctiva and cornea when the palpebral part of the lacrimal gland is removed. So the arterial supply of lacrimal gland is derived from the lateral palpebral artery, which is a branch of ophthalmic artery. And the talking about the nerve supply, so the sensory nerve supply is derived from the lacrimal nerve, and the secretomotor nerve supply, we shall discuss the entire pathway of the secretomotor nerve supply. So the lacrimal gland is stimulated by the signals from the facial nerve, but the fibers of facial nerve are carried by the maxillary and the lacrimal nerves, and we shall see the entire pathway and comprehend it. So the signals originate from the lacrimator nucleus, which is one of the parasympathetic nuclei of the facial nerve. From the nucleus to the sensory and the parasympathetic root of the facial nerve, that is the nervus intermedius. From that, the signals pass to the facial nerve, then to the geniculate ganglion of the facial nerve, and from the geniculate ganglion to the greater petrosal nerve, which is the first branch of the facial nerve. Now the greater petrosal nerve combines with deep petrosal nerve to form the nerve pterygoid canal, which is also known as Vidian's nerve. I'll write here. So it is also known as Vidian's nerve. Now the nerve to pterygoid canal forms the parasympathetic root of the pterygoparietal ganglion, and the fibers relay in the pterygoparietal ganglion. Then from the pterygoparietal ganglion, the postganglionic fibers pass to the zygomatic nerve, then to the zygomatic-temporal branch of zygomatic nerve. Then from the zygomatic-temporal branch to the lacrimal nerve, which is the branch of ophthalmic nerve. And this lacrimal nerve supplies these fibers, the secretomotor fibers, to the lacrimal gland. So in order to comprehend this pathway well, you need to study the facial nerve, the anatomy of facial nerve, especially the greater petrosal branch, and the maxillary nerve. Only then you can properly understand, or else you will have to just cram the pathway. Now we shall talk about the conjunctival sac, and firstly about the conjunctiva. So conjunctiva is of two types, bulbar and palpebral conjunctiva. The bulbar conjunctiva is the one adherent to the eyeball, and the palpebral is the one adherent to the eyelid. And these have exactly contrasting characteristics. Like the bulbar conjunctiva is thin, while the palpebral conjunctiva is thick. Bulbar is transparent, while the later is opaque, and bulbar is loosely adherent to the sclera, while the later is tightly adherent to the posterior surface of tarsal plate. And now the space between these two conjunctiva, the bulbar and palpebral, the potential space, is known as conjunctival sac, and the point where these two, the palpebral and bulbar conjunctiva meet, their junction, is known as fornix. So we have two fornices, superior and inferior fornix, and the ducts of lacrimal gland open at the superior fornix, and from there they go to the conjunctival sac, and then moisten the eyeball and the eyelids, the surface of eyeball and the deep surface of eyelids. Then we have the lacrimal puncta, lacrimal canaliculi, the tear fluid from lacrimal puncta goes to lacrimal canaliculi. So as we saw, the majority of fluid is firstly the lacrimal fluid, the tear fluid, comes to the conjunctival sac and is distributed on the surface of eyeball and the deep part of eyelids. But now the remaining parts need to be drained, right? So we have the lacrimal puncta, and from this lacrimal puncta, the fluid is driven to the lacrimal canaliculi, and from the canaliculi to the lacrimal sac further. So now we shall talk about the lacrimal canaliculi. So these are about 10 mm, the length is about 10 mm, and they have two segments, horizontal segment and a vertical segment. The horizontal segment is longer, about 8 mm, and means about 80% of canaliculus, and the vertical part is 2 mm, about 20% of the canaliculus. And at the junction of these two segments, we have a dilated ampulla. And as I said, these open into the lacrimal sac. Then we have the lacrimal sac. So lacrimal sac is lodged in the lacrimal groove, a bony groove, which is bounded anteriorly by the anterior lacrimal crest, which is a part of frontal bone, and the posterior lacrimal crest, which is a part of lacrimal bone. And here you can appreciate the frontal lacrimal suture, the suture which joins these two bones. So that is the lacrimal groove. And talking about its relations, so medially we have the lacrimal groove. Then anteriorly, we saw this earlier, that the lacrimal sac lies behind the medial palpebral ligament. So, and medial palpebral ligament it is attached at the anterior lacrimal crest. So we have the medial palpebral ligament as the anterior relation of the lacrimal sac. Then the lacrimal part of orbicularis oculi originates from the posterior lacrimal crest and the lacrimal fascia. So it lies both in the posterior and the lateral relations of the lacrimal gland. So posterior relation is the lacrimal part of orbicularis oculi, and laterally we have the lacrimal fascia along with the lacrimal part of orbicularis oculi. And this lacrimal sac is enclosed by the lacrimal fascia. And the upper end of lacrimal sac is blind. Upper end is blind, but the lower end continues as the nasolacrimal duct. Lacrimal sac continues as the nasolacrimal duct. So the nasolacrimal duct is a membranous duct which is about 18 mm long, and it is the continuation of the lacrimal sac. Moreover, its course is posteriorly backwards and lateral, and it opens into the inferior meatus of the nose. And at its lower end, where it opens up, near its lower end, we have a valve, an imperfect valve formed by the mucous membranes, which is known as the valve of Hesner. And this valve has the function of preventing the entry of air into the eyes when we are forcefully blowing our noses. So this is the valve of Hesner, the imperfect valve at the end of nasolacrimal duct. So let's brush up the complete drainage of tear fluid. So it is secreted from the lacrimal gland, then through the ducts is reached to the conjunctiva, the conjunctival sac, that is the superior fornix, and then the eyeball and the lids are moistened, and the remaining part, this is about the daily secretion. The majority of part is evaporated, and the remaining part is driven into the lacrimal puncta, then to lacrimal canaliculi, from there to lacrimal sac, and then ultimately through the nasolacrimal duct. It reaches the inferior meatus of nose and ultimately is driven out of the nose. So this is the reason why when one cries, there is simultaneous watering of nose as well. So discussing the factors which help the drainage of the tear fluid. So we have three things. The periodic blinking of eyelids, it helps in the spreading of tear fluid on the surface of eye as well as in the drainage of the fluid. Then we have the dilation of lacrimal sac by the lacrimal part of orbicularis oculi. This dilatation helps the drainage. And lastly, due to the capillary action of the tear film. So, and due to the nasolabial folds which are formed here, the tears are driven downwards. So now we shall discuss the applied points regarding the lacrimal apparatus. So we have two terms. One is the dacryocystitis. The lacrimal gland is known as dacryocyst, and the inflammation or the infection of dacryocyst is known as dacryocystitis. And another term is epiphora, that is the excess tears. Now this occurs when there is an obstruction of the pathway of drainage of lacrimal fluid, maybe nasolacrimal duct or the puncta or the canaliculi. So if there is an obstruction, then the tear fluid won't be drained, and so there is an excessive tearing in eyes, and that is known as epiphora. So this was all about the lacrimal apparatus. I hope you enjoyed learning with me. Thanks for watching.